In the last episode, I introduced America and especially Massachusetts and Boston's understanding of the National Peace Jubilee plans. Committees were created and jobs were delegated, but messages of support winged their way from all offices of authority in that area. So, welcome back again, and I hope you enjoyed the story of the biggest event in America 100 years before that famous Woodstock concert. Click like and subscribe below, and of course comment as you will. From the mayor of Boston's office, that was Mayor Shirtlet, came a letter stating, "Our country, which of late has suffered so much from the saddening effects of domestic strife, ought to rejoice most fervently in the delightful thought of peace and the restoration of our ancient harmony and friendships to all the sons of our glorious Union." And from the member of Congress, the senior member of Congress at the time, Alexander Rice, he wrote to Gilmore expressing his support and suggestion that nothing could more fitly inaugurate the era of peace and national harmony which we hope will hereafter prevail. And the incumbent governor of Massachusetts, William Claflin, he wrote in support, "Inasmuch as music inspired our soldiers in the late war in their weary marches and hard-fought battlefields, and was withal a valuable auxiliary in securing our victories, I think the restoration of peace and union could be celebrated in no more appropriate manner." Obstacles still existed, like when they were building the actual Colosseum. Where would it be built? Very quickly, a petition of objectors in Boston decided that the building should not be put on Boston Common. But eventually, the reclaimed area of Back Bay was a suitable area, or on St. James's Park, west of Berkeley Street. Positively, by 1869, over $50,000 had been raised to fund and finance the project, but they still needed a financial plan, and planners indeed, they were very lucky. The owner of the biggest store in Boston at this time came on board in full support of the enterprise. His name was Eben Jordan of Jordan Marsh Department Stores, and he managed the enterprise as he did his own stores. In addition, Mr. J. Thomas Baldwin, Gilmore's close friend for years, was busy collecting and auditioning musicians from throughout the East Coast, and in fact, anywhere he could find them. It must also be stated that he got great assistance from the famous Harvey Dodsworth from New York City. Dodsworth had a wonderful band which was extremely important and popular at this time in New York, and would have ranked as close competitors to Gilmore's band itself. Dr. Karl Zeran, a German-born flautist and conductor, would take care of the choral music education, including training and auditions. Mr. Julius Eichberg, also German-born violinist, who had come to Boston in 1857 and would later found and direct the Boston Conservatory of Music. Well, he was also the superintendent of music in the Boston schools at the time, which was going to be vital to this project. All vocal music scorebooks were produced by Oliver Ditson and Co. and furnished at a very low price to the societies initially. while critics such as John Dwight had still not come on board with any approval really of his in his musical journal, others such as Dexter Smith, Folio and Whitney journals supported it fully. I know on April the 10th, Dexter Smith journal wrote to Gilmore and mentioned that in Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit, Milwaukee, Chicago, Madison, Janesville, and every city I have visited during the past 3 months, I've been asked for particulars concerning the great event. Invitations were sent to all to come to Boston. One householder asked that the South to send the 6 worst rebels that lived in the South, and for the Peace Jubilee, this will be their home. Peace and goodwill to all men was the message sent forth. Newspapers from across the country strained their ears for any news of the Jubilee. In the UK and France, reports were carried of the event, and the committee received a telegram from a lady in Liverpool who was most interested in the event and that of the 15th of June. She said, "I shall open my windows, and who knows what I may hear." Building had commenced, supplies were delivered, and men worked feverishly on the site. But no sooner than the building took shape, a new rumour was found by naysayers who wished it ill. By April, the building was completed and named the Coliseum because of its vast size. New sidewalks were constructed and gas lines were brought to the site so people could view the magnificently huge building. And as the headline blared across the country that this Coliseum building was completed, the official edition of the Grand Musical Festival Journal was published and distributed nationally in Boston, New York, Chicago, and St. Louis. It screamed the details out to its readers. Let us have peace. National sublime and patriotic music. Grand National Jubilee. Formation of the Union. In all publicity for the event, it emphasized that this was now truly the celebration of the end of the Civil War, a Union victory, and now the country would have peace. Next job on the list for the was the organization of musicians and choirs. This was done with successive trips by both Gilmore and Baldwin to New York and wherever around the country. But after collecting this collection of talent, how to organize them for practice and eventual performance. Imagine when we go to a conference or a lecture or an event, we get a pack at the reception desk, which identifies us. Where is our seat? Where are the speakers? Who are they? What times are they? And of course, the all-important lanyard that we hang proudly around our necks. And of course, if we are very important, there are the general lanyard colours, for instance, the special ones for the speakers, etc. Well, back in the 19th century, they had all of these details and some more. They even had pictures of Gilmore, or the chief violinist, a Norwegian called Ole Bull. Then, of course, you had to get to the event and home afterwards, so you received a special train ticket which had been prearranged with the companies. And of course, if you were to be identified as a singer, designated as soprano, contralto, tenor, or bass, and of course a musician, you also received a ribbon to attach to your lapel. The ribbon was their lanyard. What excitement! And this had never been done before anywhere. And this was the biggest ever at this stage in the world. And probably the single biggest job to do was to find, organize, and sing and train the singers from a country which had, as I said before, fewer than maybe 3 choirs in the Boston area. Advertisements were placed in papers across the country, including the possibilities of participation in a choir. The interested people replied to those advertisements. Details were then sent back out to the locality how to set up a choir. Who were the important people in your choir, including obviously the choir master, the pianist, and of course the other officers, including the treasurer, someone has to mind the money, and the secretary, someone has to mind the correspondence. And what rules were to be set out for a well-formed and trained choir. Then, of course, how to assign and audition singers such as the previously mentioned, sopranos, contraltos, tenors, and basses. When all that was done, then the heavy work could begin. When the scores arrived, these scores were produced as bi-monthly bulletins, beginning in January, February, followed by February, March, and April, May, on to June, stating that this musical festival was to commemorate the restoration of peace throughout the land. And throughout the land, through this imaginative method, choirs began to appear and develop. And as it happened, this led to the development of America's love affair with song and harmony of voice, a legacy that continues to this day. Each of these bulletins almost developed the individual choir as home creations like today's mail-order educational courses. And quickly they would learn. Of course, prior to the Peace Jubilee in Boston, all these choirs arrived in Boston to begin their auditioning again, this time with Carl Zarhan. And then they had to be given final classification as sopranos, etc., etc. And then their tickets and their rules and their ribbons to be identified had to be given out. Meanwhile, back to the children mentioned before. Children would be trained and rehearsed throughout the Boston school area, and they participated particularly importantly in 2 completely unknown concerts, public concerts, which would serve as rehearsals for the main event in the Peace Jubilee. I'm very lucky to have the programs for both of those concerts in my collection. Finally, fire precautions were put in place with the fire pump tender installed in the center of the Colosseum and a storage shed for equipment on site for fighting a possible fire. Additional rules were put in place that the building was going to be a non-smoking building, and 100 Boston firemen were placed on duty for the duration of the Jubilee with obvious duty in terms of fire protection, but also with musical duties. These men were now trained how to hit the anvil in time and create a spectacle never before seen anywhere in the world. So, these firemen had a special uniform to wear for effect for the performance. They wore blue trousers, red shirts, brass helmets, and each of them carried a full-size mallet to hit their full-size anvils. I hope you've enjoyed this and look forward to seeing you next week. So please click like and subscribe to this episode so you'll be notified about the next one. Thank you for listening and see you next week. Bye now.